For nearly 2 decades, Gears of War, the legendary third-person shooter video game, has immersed players in the ultimate fight for survival on the Earth-like planet of Sera. What was meant to be just a fleet of super soldiers instead turned into something much worse. Devious villains called the Locust Horde, be they Wretches, Boomers, or the Corpsers, have ravaged the planet. And these villains aren't even the most sinister force in the series. Gears of War is crawling with even more dark and terrifying villains, each more insane than the last. So here are 10 of the most disturbing minds to ever emerge from the shadows of Sera. Continue watching only if you dare.
Foolish boy.
Queen Myra. Queen Myra, the lead villain of the Gears of War series, is depicted as having this queen bee status, being the leader and queen of the Locust War, with the Locusts ready to die for her and ready to do any bidding she might want. Born out of an unethical experiment gone wrong at the New Hope research facility, Myra would go on to become the genocidal tyrant. Despite being a queen to the Locusts and being quite fluent in Tyrant, language of the Locusts, Myra is otherwise a regular human who looks and acts human-like. She possesses immunity to emulsion and deep-rooted xenophobia that ultimately fuels her war against humanity. Myra is depicted throughout the series as someone who's driven by the belief of saving the people of Sera by purging the lambent infection as a means of securing dominance. What makes Myra truly terrifying isn't just the destruction she commands, but the calm, unwavering belief that she's right. Her cold and calculated decision to unleash the Locust Horde in the form of a genocidal invasion to wipe out humanity is regarded as one of the most brutal moments of the series. Her disturbing nonchalance in burying the lambent, whom she dehumanizes and refers to as nothing but an infection, is displayed in all its glory in the final confrontation with Marcus Phoenix in Gears of War 3. This showdown has Marcus killing Myra using his father's knife and bringing an end to the franchise's most enduring and badass villain, with no defiance or begging from Myra until the very end. It's signature moments like these that cement Queen Myra's character as #1 on this list of terrifying villains. General Rohm. When it comes to towering, silent forces of destruction whose mere presence feels like a death sentence, not many villains can even compare to Rohm, better known as General Rohm. With an iconic start as just a mere drone to then going on to become the stoic general of the Locust Horde, General Rohm becomes the symbol of sheer terror. Resonating with a similar genocidal ideology to Queen Myra, Rohm operates in a calculating and surgical manner, all fueled by his resolve to eliminate the human leadership to remove any sort of resistance at its very core. Rohm is terrifying, not only for his strength, but also for his imposing appearance, where he's depicted as mostly wielding a troika turret with his bare hands. His control over the Krill, which are the swarms of razor-winged horrors, further shrouds him in an aura of impenetrable darkness. The way he executes a Delta Squad leader with the soldier's very own pistol is nothing but stone cold and darkness personified. High, iconic showdown where he stalks Marcus and Dom, standing towering against the Delta Squad on the Tyro Pillar, alone but with no intention of cowering and accepting defeat. Just more proof of how he's an annihilation machine. In the Gears universe, Rohm isn't just a villain, he's a Grim Reaper in armor. Scourge. From serving as the High Priest of the Trinity of Worms to then taking on the role of the High General of the Locust Horde, Scourge's graph escalated from faith to merciless dominance. Born in Nexus and indoctrinated as a Cantus under Kedor Vrol, Scourge went from preaching about annihilation to straight up personally executing it. Having taken control after the death of General Rohm, Scourge operated out of sheer motivation to exterminate the lambent threat. Now, if it was at the cost of countless human lives or the capturing and torturing of Gears and Stranded, it just didn't matter to Scourge. Unlike Rohm, who was cold yet calculating in his ways, Scourge was a true fanatic who operated and thrived on the belief that brutality was his sacred duty, which makes him even more sadistic, unpredictable, and terrifying. With weapons like the dual chainsaw staff, Gorgon hammerburst rifle, Gorgon pistol, and ink grenades at his disposal, he was a menace that no one dared cross. The aerial Hydra battle, where he pursued Delta Squad through the skies only to fall in a fiery collision, stands as one of the most iconic moments in Gears of War 2. Dying as violently as he lived is an iconic moment that's honestly a very symbolic end to Scourge and a signature moment that cements his legacy.
Did you listen? Are you listening?
Dr. Nile Samson. Dr. Nile Samson, the egotistical scientist who's the overarching villain of the series, is someone who's depicted as being driven by a godlike ego and with no moral compass whatsoever. Once the director of the New Hope Research Facility, Dr. Niles was tasked with curing rust lung, a fatal disease that was caused by emulsion exposure. Instead, he ended up creating the nightmare Locust Horde by using Myra's embryonic stem cells and the DNA of sires. His sneaky manipulation, involving staging the disappearance of Myra's daughter, Reyna, and the escape attempt of Dr. Torres, Myra's lover, all stemming from his very innate intellectual superiority complex, ultimately played a fire-starter role in the Locust War and the following genocide of humanity. His goal, quite clearly, was for the Locusts and their successors to wipe out humanity and become the new rulers of Sera. He's not a mad scientist who's crazy about creating the next big invention. He's a devious person who understands the repercussions of his creations and yet is driven by the taste of dominance. The father of the locust species, he is directly and indirectly the very reason for Emergence Day, the Hammer of Dawn retaliation, and the millions of lives that are lost across the series. He disguised and justified his genocidal actions as a scientific necessity. An iconic and signature moment of his in the series is his living on through a twisted AI system version of himself in Mount Kadar, where he continues to taunt and test even after death.
You failed us!
Queen Reyna. The hybrid monarch of the swarm, Queen Reyna Torres, was born through genetic manipulation at the hands of Dr. Nile Samson. Sure, she's a villain nonetheless, but more so a villain that was born with the cruel reality that she was never meant to lead a normal life. Raised during her formative years by her father, Dr. Torres, and then getting reabsorbed into the swarm and transformed into a swarm queen like her mother, Queen Reyna is pushed into a vicious cycle of generational trauma and upholding of warped legacy. This legacy being her mother's immunity to emulsion, psychic link to the hive mind, and decelerated aging. Once an outsider leader who wanted nothing else but to protect her people, she now resonated with Myra's genocidal agenda. This corruption of her mother devastates Kate Diaz, a central figure in the series and the daughter of Reyna and Gabriel Diaz. Kate, who had to mercy kill her own mother and then witness her being resurrected into the Locust Queen and donning a brutal persona, further declares Kate's body the next vessel for Myra. One of the most heartbreaking and signature moments that has left a lasting mark in viewers' minds is Reyna having to beg Kate to sever her ties to the hive, knowing it would kill her, which is just chilling. The terrifying transformation that Reyna undergoes, along with her strong stance against allowing the Hammer of Dawn to reactivate, is just proof of how bleak her entire personality shift is.
Summon the beast! Crush them!
Ukon. Once a human child afflicted with rust lung, Ukon soon became patient zero in one of Dr. Nile Samson's many bizarre experiments. Having his DNA fused with that of the hollow creatures and exposed to emulsion, Ukon mutated into the first intelligent sire, becoming the Locust's chief bioengineer with full consciousness and regenerative immortality. If you think about it, strip away the crazy scientist facade that Ukon displays and rethink his origin story, a sick child turned against his will into an immortal monster, all to facilitate a lust for destruction and dominance. He turned creatures like the shibboleth, reavers, and corpsers into living, breathing weapons, each tailored to fight against human weaknesses. His invention of the concept of processing, i.e. turning humans into drones, is a signature moment that cements his name on the list today. His cold-blooded murder of Dr. Torres, robbing Reyna of her father and continuing the twisted cycle of trauma passed on to Kate, is another such signature moment that sets off a chain reaction of events no one saw coming. Ultimately, being killed by Reyna as vengeance for everything he'd done and the murder of her father, Ukon's death is quite dramatic, yet seemingly apt, with justice and closure served together. The Matriarch. Another twisted product of Dr. Nile Samson's many experiments, the Matriarch, also known as UL-119-2, is created using Queen Myra's embryonic stem cells and the DNA from the mutated sires. The Matriarch, who supposedly was the first successful Locust hybrid, became the maternal blueprint for all the Locust Horde that followed. Despite being called a matriarch, she was anything but maternal. Instead of possessing a violent streak and proving herself as uncontrollable, the matriarch had to be stored in stasis. Even in her dormant state, the matriarch shared a psychic connection with Myra and manipulated not just her, but weaponized her entire bloodline, including Reyna and then Kate. The impact that she has on Kate is all the more terrifying and eerie with the way she transmits scary visions and twisted subconscious narratives, and ultimately disarms Kate and destabilizes her for months. Her manipulation situation ultimately leads to Kate's uncle being brutally killed, raising the emotional stakes. Ultimately, the epic face-off that occurs between Kate and the matriarch, wherein she's forced to come face-to-face with the actual embodiment of her haunted side and the darkness that's been plaguing her for months, is a moment that you just can't miss. It's the cold and scary thought that Kate goes back and forth on, whether she's also destined to lead a life as Myra or her own mother, and the horror that she underwent after her then transformation. General Karn. One of the major antagonists of the Gears of War series, General Karn was the tyrant field commander of the Locust Horde, having previously also served as the Horde's first commander during the early days of the Locust War. Disowned and alienated when he was young, he befriended a wounded beast that he named Shibboleth, even crafting a mechanical leg for it, ultimately creating the perfect war accomplice for himself. Strangely, an irony that can't be denied is the cold way he carried out genocidal mass murders, at the same time displaying empathy towards a wounded beast who required urgent care, and not only took it under his wing, but eventually developed a close bond with it as well. He was, in fact, the mastermind behind the Locust's first apocalyptic assault on Sera, which later came to be known as Emergence Day. Resonating with the whole genocidal ideology, he wreaked havoc on cities like Gorasnia and Havlo Bay, reducing civilizations to mere rubble. Karn operated differently, yet independently, showing no such loyalty to Myra nor acting on any Locust doctrines. Everything he did was calculated, articulated, and stemmed from weaponizing fear. One epic moment that's quite cinematic is how he pursues Kilo Squad to the trial, turning the very courthouse into a battleground, where he then controls Shibboleth amid the battle. His tyrannical reign further laid the foundation for Rohm's reign. It's safe to say that General Karn can be seen as a pioneer in many ways, and terror is at the top of that list.
I'm waiting on you. Finish up.
Colonel Lumis. Unlike the rest of this list of mutants and superhumans, Colonel Ezra Pound Lumis is an authoritarian so strict that it borders on straight-up villain territory. Born in poverty in Tyrus, Lumis made his way up to the ranks of the Coalition of Ordered Government's army, known for his sheer discipline, his utter devotion to discipline, and his strictly by-the-book nature. A significant defining moment that gives us a glimpse into just how warped the Colonel is can be seen when Kilo Squad went against orders and used a light mass missile to stop General Karn in order to save Havlo Bay. Lumis then charged them with treason, conducting their trial in the middle of an ongoing war zone. This decision of his obviously came at the cost of many soldiers' sacrifice made in the name of protocol. His last stand in Havlo Bay, where his devotion finally turns to sacrifice, comes a little too late to absolve his ruthlessness. Psychologically speaking, his inability to defy the rigidity of rules and protocol and his lack of space for empathy and humanity are precisely why he deserves a spot on this list alongside the other monsters and villains. Lumis is a villain that, despite being more human than the rest, lacks even a trace of humanity. The Locust Horde as a whole. You know it's bad when the whole species gets a spot on the list, but that's just what the Locust Horde are. Humanity's worst nightmare, a chain reaction of bioengineering gone wrong and evolution twisted into something monstrous. The group, which was also referred to as grubs by the Serans, was the result of a series of genetic experiments at the hands of Dr. Nile Samson, the devious mad scientist working at the New Hope Research Facility. The scientist who carried out unethical experiments on emulsion-mutated children's DNA and combined it with that of the hollow creatures, ultimately gave rise to these human hybrids. The actual horror started when Myra, a child immune to emulsion, became a pawn in his nefarious scheme. Owing to her psychic link to the Locusts, she became their queen and, ironically, led a bloody massacre against the very scientists who created her and the rest. The most iconic signature moment that really cements why the Locust Horde can be considered a true villain in the first place is their initial strike, wherein the Locusts erupted from the earth, changing life on Sera forever. The hive-minded intelligence and calculated brutality are what truly make the Locust Horde scary. We can safely deduce that their war isn't random. Rather, it's deliberate, coming from a place of survival and revenge against those who morphed them into what they are today. Marvelous verdict! From ruthless generals to mad scientists, Gears of War has no shortage of nightmare-inducing villains. They weren't just the typical mainstream bad boys added for shock value in a story, but rather each of these villains, be it the matriarch and her ability to make Kate question everything she knows, or the majestically tyrannical General Rohm, brought a personal origin story to the battlefield. It wasn't the war that turned them dark and terrifying, it was all a game of circumstance and how it ultimately played them while morphing them into stone-hearted monsters. Gears. So, who's your pick for the most terrifying Gears villain? Let us know down below. And if you're craving more twisted characters and all things dark and strange, be sure to check out the rest of our channel. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.